Good evening, everyone. At least for me, it's good evening. I don't know where you are based, but I'm from the Netherlands. I'm based in a small village called Haastrecht, which is close to Gouda, actually, which you probably know as Gouda, the cheese city. Today, I will tell you a little bit more about Power BI and external tools and how they can work together and improve your development experience in Power BI. You might be already familiar with these three logos like DAX Studio, Tabular Editor, and ALM Toolkit. We will see all three of them very briefly today, and I will also demo my own built external tool to document your Power BI model as fourth option, and I will demo you how you can start creating your own Power BI external tool. So we will see these three tools, but before we get started, a very brief introduction, which is a little bit of a repeating of what Kevin already did. My name is Marc. I'm working as a data and AI consultant at Marc in the Netherlands. I'm actively speaking on different speaking engagements last year all around Europe, this year mostly online. I'm also blogging on my own website, data-marc.com. Or you can find me at powerbeer.com, which you can see on the right side with the mugs and t-shirts and everything. And I'm also happy that I'm awarded as Microsoft Data Platform MVP and mainly active in the AI community. Enough about me. Let's look at a brief look at our agenda for today. First of all, external tools. What is it? I will quickly talk you through what an external tool is for Power BI and demo you a few of them. Then we will have a short stop at analysis services and memory and why this is so important in relation to the external tools. As third topic, how to build an external tool. And as fourth, I would really love to use all your attention here and all your inputs for the next version of my own external tool. So I conducted a short Kahoot where I really would love to hear your input for the next version of the external tool. So we'll do that all the way to the end. First, external tools, what is it? External tools are actually third-party tooling that you can start using on top of Power BI Desktop. And you can use them on top of Power BI Desktop to create your Power BI data model. And I especially say data model because it doesn't do a single thing with your Power BI report. It only works for your data model. It's third-party tooling which reads and writes to what's called TOM, Tabular Object Model, and that is the metadata that is written by Power BI as well as analysis services. This is all depending on the new metadata format that was released and generally available since the September 2020 release of Power BI Desktop. Before that, it was all public preview. So a few of the things that I want to show you today, for example, with DAX Studio, are things that were already possible before the new metadata format was available, but was unsupported. And with the new metadata available, these are all supported features and supported by Microsoft by default. Connecting with third-party tools, the three of them that you might be familiar with is DAX Studio, that you can use obviously for DAX. Tabular Editor, that is more focusing on your data model tables, creating measures quickly, but also generating content like measures and columns. ALM Toolkit, that you can use to compare different models together. You might know that from a Visual Studio plugin that was called BISM Normalizer. It's actually the identical tool, but now as a separate tool and not as a plugin for Visual Studio. But there's much more already available today as external tools. After the release of the public release of external tools, a lot of people out there in the community started building their own external tools on top of Power BI. It's all open source, so you can build your own tools here. So maybe your tool is the next. And I would like to invite you to start having a look at what external tools can do for you. And also start to have a look if you have a good idea to build your own external tool. It doesn't have to be super complex. I'm not a developer myself, and I was able to create an external tool. I will tell you in a bit more about how I built my own external tool. So I always like to take a risk, so let's dive directly into the demos. I will stop my slide sharing and I will dive into the demos where it will tell you how you can connect external tools to Power BI, how you can create new measures in Power BI by leveraging external tools, how you can push a measure to the Power BI service from an external tool to the Power BI service, and publish content using XML endpoints. So this is a premium feature, the last one, using ALM toolkit. So let's go for it. First of all, we want to connect to the external tools. I opened already 3 Power BI desktop instances, and in Power BI, I just opened the dashboard in a day content, which is the very basic content that you can download online. And in Power BI, on the top ribbon, you have an option that is called External Tools. Once you go there, you see a full list of options that I already have here. And all these options are coming from the external tools that I installed or manually added here. If it is really a tool that you can install with an installer like the Next Finish installer that we all do, we never read the terms and conditions probably. That's, for example, DAX Studio and Tabular Editor and ALM toolkit. But there's a lot more, as you can see. For example, one that I'm a really big fan of is the DAX Beautifier. The DAX Beautifier formats all your DAX expressions in your model nicely formatted in the way it should be instead of everything in one line. Well, there's a lot more. I will not show you yet my document model that I will do in a second. But for example, there's also an Excel connector that is built by Eric Swenson and other MVP, or for example, a SQL Server profiler and much more. So all these tools can connect on demand to your Power BI desktop that is running on your computer at this moment. For example, let's just make a connection with DAX Studio. And by simply clicking the button for DAX Studio, it will open DAX Studio, the application for me, and directly connect to my data model. It shows on my other screen, so let's move it back here. It is directly connected. I didn't have to click the connect button myself. The connection was made instantly. This really helps to speed up your development experience. And I see that I also need to download a new version even. And the same applies for every other external tool that we have. For example, let's do the same with Tabular Editor. Once I simply click the button, Tabular Editor opens, and in the top here we can see that it's connected in the top of this application to my analysis service that is running on my computer at this moment, because analysis service is under the hood of Power BI. So let's see, for example, that we have here all the tables. So here we see the same tables that I have on the right-hand side in Power BI. So let's go for it. Let's try to create a new measure into this data model using the external tool. Of course, we can create measures inside of Power BI, but why not do it with the external tools, as they might be a little bit more user-friendly, for example. As this is a sales data model, let's try to create a metric for the average sales. We already have a sum of sales here, so the sales total. So if I just simply click the measure, I can already see the measure expressions and all properties that are applied to it. But let's create a new one and add a new measure for the average sales. So I just do a right click here and say new. And here I can start typing what my measure expression should be. So here it was average. It's the sales table and the revenue column. I know this data model by a little bit, so I can just start typing it. And now start filling in the measure details here on the bottom. For example, I want to change the name to following my name convention. It is about the actual revenue, so it is about money, revenue, and we talk about an average here. Something that I always really like, for example, is the description. And I always fill this description as well with a functional described description what this measure is representing. Revenue. Of course, you can write whatever you want here, but it's just filling the description. And you will see in a little bit why this is so important once we start talking about the model documenter. Once I'm done, I simply click the Accept Changes button here, and you see that the measure is created on the left-hand side. It shows a little question mark icon here as well, which shows me that it is something new that is not applied to my data model yet. That runs in Power BI Desktop. So once I click this little save icon here on the very top, it saves the changes to the connected database. So let's do that. And you see that the little question mark disappeared. Once I go back to Power BI Desktop here, I see that the measure is instantly available here. And this was something that was not available and not possible before we had external tools. There were some unsupported features where you could create a measure in Power BI, but you needed to restart Power BI and it was very likely to end up with a corrupted file. But as of the new metadata is available, you can do all this supported. So I just have a new metric here. It shows exactly what I just created. And once I hover over here, I also see the description that I added to this metric. Why I like Tabular Editor so much? Actually, adding descriptions to metrics that are created in Power BI requires me to go to the model view here and then start filling these description fields. The challenge actually is that I cannot see the measure expression that was created once I click the metric here. If I do all this in Tabular Editor, I can see both at the same time. So I have my metric or my expression here, as well as the display folder, as well as the name of it and the description field. I can fill everything in one place, which makes it much easier for me. So that's an option what you can do with measure expressions in leveraging external tools like Tabular Editor. Now let's have a look at the third external tool that we can use and is a provided tool by Microsoft actually. It is a tool that's created by Christine Wade, which is one of the program managers that's working at Power BI, and he created ALM Toolkit. Imagine that we just created the new revenue average metrics here, and I created the same Power BI data set and the same report in the Power BI service here. But this one does not include yet the average metric. So what we're going to do, we're going to leverage external tools, and we're going to leverage ALM Toolkit to do a schema comparison between the data model that we have here in the Power BI service and the data model that I'm running here in Power BI Desktop, which includes the new metric. Once we did a schema compare, I can tell ALM Toolkit to push this new metric to the Power BI service, and I can create on-demand new metrics in the Power BI service without republishing the data set there. Why is this so cool? Because I don't need to republish the data set. I'm not overriding the data inside the file. So if you work with really large data sets, you don't have to refresh it all the time in the Power BI service, because you can just simply push only the changes you've made. So again, let's go to the top ribbon to external tools and spin up ALM Toolkit. Once ALM Toolkit is opened, it will directly show me that it's connecting to Power BI Desktop to my open Power BI Desktop file, which is the dashboard in a day final report. That's the one I opened. Secondly, this is the source side, so that's what I want to compare to something else, which is my target side. And here we're going to fill in the XML endpoint. So that requires you to have Power BI Premium. This workspace is a Power BI Premium workspace, as you can see here on the little icon on top. Please know you can also do this with a free preview that is available for you today with the Premium per user licensing. It is a free preview, so be aware that you cannot build production, or at least not advise you to build production scenarios in there, as there will be a point where you have to pay for this license. If I go to the workspace and I go to my settings here and go to Premium, I can copy paste my connection string here to my workspace and paste that in ALM Toolkit here. And once I click the little drop down, it will show me all data sets that are in this workspace. But first I need to authenticate. So I can quickly sign in to Power BI, and it shows me both the data sets that are available to me today in this workspace. So we want to do a schema compare from the Power BI Desktop file to the final report in Power BI that was published without that one specific measure. Let's click OK, and Power BI will now run a schema compare or ALM Toolkit. And this will show me the entire schema, the data model schema that is under the hood, which is actually the tabular object model that it's comparing. If I scroll down here, you see everything that is compared to each other. So we have the model, we have the expressions for all the tables. And here on the bottom, we see what is actually compared. And we see on both left and right hand side the expression that is shown. For example, here we have the Power Query expression. For all these items here, you see the action is skip, unless we have the new metric here. Here you see that it is set to create. And why is that? Well, it shows us that on the left-hand side, on our source side, we have a measure which is called the revenue average, but it's missing in the target. So it's missing in the Power BI service, and it suggests me to create this one metric in the Power BI service. We also see it here on the bottom. So on the left-hand side in green displayed, we see all the information about our measure, which doesn't exist on the right-hand side. Once we've done this and we identified all our changes, we can set it here to create or skip, but now we want to create it. I can click on the very top validate selection, and it shows me that's going to do one thing. It's going to create this one measure. After I click OK, the update button becomes available, as well as the generate script. There are two different things that you can do here. If I click update, Power BI will start, or ALM Toolkit will start pushing this change to Power BI service. Once I click option or generate script, it will give me an XML script that I can integrate in, for example, tools like Azure DevOps. And if I integrate it in Azure DevOps, I can push my changes from there on a specific defined time slot. For now, let's just click update. Yes, I'm sure that I want to upgrade the target site. And it's pushing the changes right now. And it only deployed the metadata. It's something that I forgot to tell. Now we only deployed the metadata and it's deployed successfully. But in the option settings or in the options of this tool, we can define if it needs to reprocess the data set or not. So if I click the options button on the top, I can set some settings here, and I set it to not process the data set, or you can define to fully process the data set. So this shows you if Power BI will start a refresh or not. I decided to not do that. After I deployed the change, it will automatically run a revalidation of all the changes, and you can see that everything is set to skip now because there's nothing new to deploy. So let's have a look in the Power BI service. Once we open this report and we click edit, if we see this new metric available to us. So there we go, we click edit. And in our sales table, in our sales display folder, we should have a new metric. And there it is, the revenue average, including the description that we filled in. So we just were able to create a new measure in the Power BI service without hitting the publish button in Power BI desktop, so without overwriting our data set. I think this is really cool and really helpful if you want to do a lot of changes or work together with a colleague on the same data set and you want to do a schema comparison to the work you've both done and integrate it into one place together. Having that said, I think that sums up the demo for now, and let's go back to the slides. Yep, there we go again. So I showed you the demos to connect with external tools, create a new measure, and push a measure to the Power BI service, and how you can publish content using XML endpoints and ALM Toolkit. Creating or adding external tools to your Power BI desktop instance can be a lot of work, simply because you need to install them one by one, which is simply a lot of work. Luckily, the guys from Power BI Tips, Mike Carlo in specific, he built a very easy to go installer, which is called Business Ops, where you can just have one installer to install all these external tools in one go. He allows you to just click the ones that you need and install them in one go, especially if your computer is managed by IT. This can be very useful, simply because you only need to have one time the admin permissions to install all these external tools in one go. I believe it's really powerful because, for example, he's reading my GitHub repository on demand. So as soon as I publish a new version, it is directly available in his tool to allow everyone to install the latest version as well. So what's out there? I already told you a little bit about what work that Eric Swenson has done with his Excel connector, as well as a connector to Power BI Report Builder, and even to open your Power BI data model in Tableau. Power BI Tips guys publish some Teams galleries and a lot of more content of and their hot swap data connection and a lot more content of their own website in there. Steve Campbell published the hot swap connection, SQL Server Profiler. David Eldersveld published the Python one, for example. And the one I talked about already, the one from Davis, who published the DAX Beautifier, which is a really useful one if you ask me. So I already gave you some spoilers about analysis services in memory. This is actually what Power BI is doing under the hood. It's running analysis services. But we were talking about Power BI, right? Yes, that's true. But with the new metadata, the metadata format for Power BI and Azure Analysis Services became similar. So if you open your task editor while you're running Power BI on your computer, you will see that actually SQL Server Analysis Services is running on your computer. It's spinning up Azure Analysis Services and working in there and connect that to your Power BI instance. So Power BI is similar to Azure Analysis Services if we talk about the metadata. So what does this metadata look like? Well, it is, as I already said, available since September 2020, and it exactly matches the analysis service metadata, what is conducted in the model.bim file. This combines the entire structure, what's called the tabular object model, and is an open format, so it's a JSON format. On the right-hand side, you see a schematic overview of what this JSON format looks like, where we talk about, for example, the server, database, model, data source connections, all the tables, columns, measures, hierarchies, and whatever we have in there, and all in this structure in this format, which is a fixed structure. If we look at the old metadata of Power BI, that was sometimes a little bit hard to read, and now if you open the metadata of a Power BI model, it looks always the same and always in a similar structure. So if we start talking about building external tools, well, there's more that we can do, but there are three things that we need to do to set up our own external tool. First of all, of course, you need to build your application. You need to create a fancy icon, of course, and you need to integrate it with Power BI Desktop. These three things are separate tasks that you need to do. And let's run through them quickly. How I set up my own external tool, I build everything in PowerShell. As I already said, I'm not a developer, so I choose to go for PowerShell as this is something that I can understand, can run line by line, and easily test what it's doing. So I decided to set up something in PowerShell to test it and run it. And if you run my external tool, you also see the PowerShell screen flickering to a screen. I know that other MVPs did similar things. For example, I know that Eric Swenson did it in a similar way to just quickly spin up PowerShell, run your tool, and then get back to Power BI. Secondly, you need to create your own icon, and your icon needs to be formatted in a base64 format, which is actually a long GUID. This you can easily create if you have a PNG or a JPEG file. You can upload it to a website to convert it to base64 format and include it in the third step we need to do in the pbitool.json file. The pbitool.json file is a file that creates the button inside Power BI Desktop. If you've done that, it looks like this in this exact structure, which is also a JSON format, by the way. And in there you define the version of it, the name, description, where the tool is located that it needs to run, possibly arguments, as well as the icon, which is the base64 icon. So let's just go for it, because I will demo you this all in a second as well. You need to drop this pbitool file in a very specific folder in your program files. So you need to have admin privileges on your computer to do this. But let's just demo this in a second, how you can create your own external tool. And let's just create an external tool for the Power Break session that directs to the website of Power Break. So let's go back. And first of all, you might have already seen it because the button was already there as I tested it this morning. But let's just close all the Power BI instances that I've opened at this moment, and then recreate it all from scratch. There we go. Everything's closed now. What I have right here, and let's open a second one. And if I go to the external tools tab, there we go. Here you see all the connections that I have in Power BI as external tools. So you see the hot swap connections, my own model documenter, for example, ALM toolkit, DAX Studio, they're all in here. So let's just get rid of this one because we want to recreate it. Yes, I want to delete it. And let's open the one from DAX Studio, for example. And I want to open it in Notepad++. If we look at it, we see something like this. So we're running DAX Studio as external tool. It's spinning up this application, which is DAX Studio, of course, connecting to the server. And here is the image. So what I already did is I put everything together here. And in this folder here, I already downloaded the logo or the image from the internet. And if I go to base64-image.de, I can just upload it here. Or I can just drag and drop it. That's also possible. Or is it this one? And if I go to this website, it uploads directly. And here is my base64 format. Secondly, I want to create a link to the website. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go to powerbidays.com. And then I'm going to attend. And here we have the web page of today. So we want to have this URL. Let's just leave it open for a second. Having that said, let's just copy paste this one to continue. And rename it to not copy. One thing that's important to keep is the PBI tool.json part at the end. If you don't leave that in, Power BI will not recognize it as external tool. So we just call it Power Break, yes, and then start editing it. If you create a file like this for the first time, I advise you just, like I just did, copy paste it from someone else and start editing it. So now we just copy pasted the one from DAX Studio, and let's just start editing it to our new tool that's called Power Break. By the way, let me quickly show you that we don't have it anymore in Power BI at this moment. So if we open Power BI and we go to the external tools tab, yes, go away. You can see that we now have twice DAX Studio because I copy pasted the connection, but we don't have the Power Break option anymore. So close Power BI again, and in a second we will have it again. So we create a new one, which is called Power Break. We tell it here that we're going to direct to the Power Break website. And we want to create a connection to an application that it needs to open. In this case, we want to open a browser. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go for Internet Explorer, because then you're 100% sure that every computer has it. Let's just find where it is. Where is it located? Let's do it this way. Show me the location. Open file location. And there we go. And we copy paste this entire section. So we want to have the path where this file is located. And we put it in here. Notice that in here you see double backslashes, and that's also what we're going to do here. I spent a lot of time in finding out why this matters, and I still have no clue. But I know for sure that you need to have double backslashes in the path. Otherwise, it simply doesn't work and shows you a corrupted message. As we're not going to create a connection to Power BI, but simply open the website, we don't need the server argument here. Simply paste the website here. So here we have the website to the Power Break, and we go back, paste it in there. And last but not least, we want to have an image that is representing our new button. So let's get rid of what is in here right now. And then just paste ours. We already created it here. So copy to clipboard. And there we go. Now we should be good to go. So let's save it. Yes, we want to save it.
I think you may have spelled the IE Explorer on it. You've got an R on the end there. IE Explorer.exe.
Let me double check. You're really sharp.
Somebody in the chat mentioned it.
Just to be sure. Yep. Save it once again. And let's see. So let's open Power BI. And if it didn't work, it would probably break once we click the button and show us a message that it couldn't find the program. For now, I said let's go for Internet Explorer because that's installed on every computer. That's also one of the reasons why I chose to go for PowerShell, because that's also on every Windows computer. Power BI Desktop is opened. I even don't need to load a data model in here. Once I go to External Tools, and there we go. We have the Power Break button here. Let's see what happens once we click this button. It will simply, of course, on my other screen, open Internet Explorer and direct us to the corresponding web page. So it is this easy to start creating something and, for example, also add your own buttons to the top ribbon of Power BI to quickly go to, for example, DAX Formatter or go to DAX Patterns or anything else that you prefer or have a look at pretty often once you work with Power BI. So you can easily add your own buttons here. Let's close this one for now. Now I showed you how to create this, but you don't know yet how to build the tool itself. So let me just open the PowerShell script that I set up. And that is in this folder to create my own tool and show you what I did. So these are all the files that I need to create my own external tool. And once I edit the PowerShell file, I will quickly show you what I actually did. I put in a lot of documentation just for myself that I know what I'm doing and where I did which step. So here it's showing my default location where it will install the tool and some if statement that will look if the tool is installed by the business ops tool from the Power BI.tips guys or done manually by myself. It writes it to the host, so in other words, it will show it on the screen where it is located, as well as that I put in some transcript, so that's putting some monitoring that if it fails, I can read the script and see where it went wrong. And what I'm doing here is actually dropping the PBI model.log file on a specific location, as well as starting to download the template file that I'm using in my external tool. What I'm doing in my external tool is actually opening another Power BI instance that will make a connection to the already open Power BI instance. So it's opening a PBIT file and saving that on a specific location. And if that file doesn't exist yet on the computer, it will start downloading it from GitHub automatically. And all this here, this is the part that I wanted to show you. Here you see server and database. That's argument 0 and argument 1. If we look at the PBI tool.json file and we open that again, we see that in my arguments here, you see first that it's opening the PowerShell script, which is this part. And secondly, it shows here the \server and \database, which is argument 0 and argument 1. And that is how I know which Power BI instance I'm going to open and which Power BI instance it needs to connect to. In other terms, which Power BI desktop it needs to connect to. These are the two arguments that are in there. And these are the two arguments that you will see in every Power BI external tool PBI tool.json file. And that is simply how it's working to create a connection. So that's the server and the database, which is argument 0 and argument 1. In my case, I write them to the screen again, so I just want to show them on the screen so I know what I'm doing. And yeah, the rest is actually just not really relevant right now. I create an on-demand JSON file that I drop in a temporary folder, which is the business ops folder, which is read by Power BI once I open the PBIT file. But that's how it's working, and that's the model documenter connection details.json file. But that's how it's working under the hood. And as I already told, I did all this in PowerShell, and I was not very familiar with PowerShell before I started writing this. So all this together is what I've learned from others by just Googling, trying out parts of scripts or entire scripts from others and see if I can do the same. So in my case, Google was my best friend. And to give you a little indication, the first version of my tool was ready within 3 hours. And then I gave it another day to finalize it and make it a little bit more stable and make sure that it's all working as it should be. So let's just see how this thing is working. Let's see what it's actually doing. If I go back to the folder where I had some of my Power BI files, I will open a PBIX file again. Now let's go for this one. And I will just hit the button to go to external tools and document my model. And in the meantime, let me quickly scroll to the slides. Yeah, I think we first have like 4 or 5 more slides. So let's jump to the slides in the meantime while it's opening Power BI. What I built is a model documenter, and the model documenter is actually opening another Power BI file that is going to show you all about your data model. So it's showing you your Power Query expressions, your DAX expressions, the active relationships, inactive relationships, even if you turn on the auto-date time feature of Power BI, and it also does some best practices checks. As you can see here in red, it shows you and it flags for you if there's a many-to-many relationship or a bidirectional one, for example. All this is done by leveraging the dynamic management views that we can run on top of a data model, on top of analysis services actually. And dynamic management views are nothing more, nothing less than querying the metadata of your data model. And this is what you can also do with DAX Studio. In DAX Studio, you can run on-demand dynamic management view queries to your data model. Let me show you them in a second, because that's what I'm doing in my PBIT file actually. I already walked you through the PowerShell script that I did, and I created an on-demand temporary file, dumped it on a specific location, and especially a few of the learnings I already shared. So server and database are the most important parameters that allows you to connect to your Power BI file. Make sure that you have the double backslash and not lose too much time on that. Yeah, I learned a lot about PowerShell in general, simply because I was not very familiar with it, but I learned a lot by just doing it. And to be very honest, that temporary file that I dump is a kind of workaround. I'm still looking for options to directly ingest it in Power BI and make sure that it directly opens the Power BI file. So I opened the dashboard in a PBIX file. And once I go to external tools, I can hit the document model button, and you quickly saw the PowerShell script flickering through the screen. If you were really fast, you might have seen an error as well on the screen, and that is because my error handling is not entirely correct yet. It still works, but it's showing you an error that option 1 was not valid, so it went for option 2. In other words, it couldn't find the template file, and it decided to download the template file from GitHub, which is all fine. If I open the PowerShell automatically opens the PBIT file that it downloaded from GitHub, which includes the model documentation. And it asks me to tell me where this temporary file location is. In my case, it is on the default location, so it's on my C drive, which is like this. Yep. And now I can just click load. as I've told you that the Power BI is running in memory of your computer and actually spinning up in memory and analysis services, I need to connect with Windows credentials here, simply because it's connecting to my in-memory database on my computer. So it will ask me 2 times how I want to connect, and in both cases I need to use Windows authentication. Oh, it's only 1 even. Once it's done, it opens the Power BI report, and let's get rid of all this. And in the different tabs here, we have the Power Query expressions. So on this tab, I show you all the tables that are in the model, including all the table types. So is it generated in Power Query or in DAX, for example? The local date tables, if you have enabled them, they are created in DAX. And the way how the value is stored in memory. Is it stored using hash or value principle? And value is like typical for an integer, and hash is typical for text and other types of data. If I click one of these tables, on the right-hand side, I can see the Power Query expression that is used to generate this table, as well as for DAX, I can see the DAX expression that is used to generate this table. On the top, you even see tables to be deleted, and that's what I'm flagging if you have the tables enabled. So if you hover over, it will show you a tooltip that explains you why I think you should delete them and how to do this. The same goes for the DAX calculated columns. I also flag why you should get rid of the DAX calculated columns and how to do this. Once we go to the second tab, there we have measure expressions. And if we go to measure expressions, it will show you the table where the measure is located, as well as all the measures themselves. If there is a display folder, for example, here we have 2 in a display folder, it will also show you the display folder where it's in, the expression, and if there is a description, it will show you the description. Finally, on the right-hand side, we see for every metric, in this case, an orange flag that is showing me that there is no description field. This is one of my personal best practices. I believe that, in fact, every measure should have a description. If you hand over this solution to your colleague, for example, you need to know where is this measure built for and why is this relevant. The last column, needs attention, shows you if the measure is broken for whatever reason, that it is broken. It will show you a red flag that it needs attention and you need to have a look at it. Finally, we have the relationships view, which shows you all the tables, if the relationship is active or not, and based on what table and column, it points to another table and column. I think that there's a little bug in here if I look at this right now, because it shows twice the same. So let me look at it after this session. But what it should be doing is show me date that points to sales order date, for example. So it shows you the relationship view and in which direction the relationships are pointing. Last 2 pages are the tooltip pages, so not a specific page on its own. I think that this can be very useful to deliver with every solution that you're building, and especially to make it easier to document your Power BI models instead of conducting a Word document or something else. You can just generate it in a few clicks and have it directly available for you. I think I have 1 or 2 more slides, so let's go back there before we run into the Kahoot, where I really want to hear what you think about documenting the model and what is important for me to focus on for my next version of the model documenter. I already did this demo, so let's skip this one. Yeah, let's go to the code. I should have already opened it. There we go. Yep. So I would really love if you can all go to kahoot.it. And in there, yeah, we want to have classic mode. If you go to kahoot.it, and in there you can click on the play button, and please enter this pin, this game pin, and I will also post it in the chat. Oh, that's really big. And then I would love to hear more from you about what you think about documenting models and if it is important or not. just wait for a minute or so. I believe it's only 6 questions. And in these questions, it's really high over. What do you think about external tools? What do you think about documenting models? You think it's important or not? And what you might be missing in the current version that I need to focus on the next version. I see there are 17 people in the call, so I will just give it another minute or so before we run into the final part and continue on. Okay, I think you can still join while I click start, so should be good. The first question that I have is actually about, it's a poll, and do you think that documentation is overrated? It's just a simple true or false, yes or no. Luckily, everyone says no. I'm really happy about this. I often have discussions with colleagues where they say, not only colleagues, but also a lot of other people, that just say, yeah, but it takes so much time to conduct all this documentation. And I always tell them, if you could generate it, would you do it? And then they always say yes. So the second one is again a poll. Do you currently document your Power BI solutions? Just curious to hear if you're currently doing that. Option 1 is always, I describe every detail. Option 2, I generate something and that's it. The third one, I manually put something together. Or the fourth one, documentation, what's that? It's good that at least someone describes every detail. And yeah, I'm happy to see that nobody's, again, not doing any documentation. And manually putting something together, yeah, that's an interesting one, because it is especially, I think, good if you could template it, that your documentation always looks similar. And no matter what solution you deliver, you always have the same content that you put together. The third one is a multi-select, so you can select multiple options here. What type of documentation do you prefer? Option 1, a PDF auto-generated. Option 2, a Word document that describes everything in more detail. Option 3, a Power BI report as the model documenter is today. And option 4, an Excel sheet, so I can freely add more context. Oh, this one is really well spread. Okay. So in fact, I should build all of them. I think I need another month off or so to build all of them and test them. Okay. Interesting one is the PDF, I think. I put it in here in the code, but personally, I was not really a big fan of it because then it's fixed and you're not freely to add context to it or add more details to it. But let's see. The fourth one, again, a multi-select. I want to document the following items. Option 1, Power Query. 2, DAX expressions. The fourth one, relationships and model. And the fourth one, columns and table properties. Luckily, almost everyone clicked all of them. I'm really happy to see this. The fifth question. A model documentation tool should be option 1, an application on its own like DAX Studio or Tabular Editor. Option 2, flexible and easy to customize. Option 3, the current version of Power BI in Power BI is fine to me. Okay. Flexible and easy to customize. Well, most of you choose for the flexible and easy to customize, which is also part of what I've done with my tool today, because you can actually customize it. Everything's on GitHub, so you can make it your own. The interesting one is an application. I'm really thinking about this, of doing this, but as I said, I'm not a developer. I doubt if this will be a success or not. So that's why I thinking about making it more flexible and give you options to go, for example, the different outputs in a Word, Excel, PDF, or Power BI, but still make it as flexible as possible. Last one, the word cloud. What is currently missing and do you want to add? You can only enter one answer here. So what's your most interesting thing that you want to add here? I'm curious to see what the outcome will be of this question. Ten seconds left before this question is done. There we go. DAX code in a diagram. In report document. Okay. Visual documentation. Yes, that's the one I had in mind as well. I really wanted this document my visuals. Solution suggestions. That's also a good one. Yeah. The person will type in DAX code in diagram. Are you okay if you unmute and explain what you mean with DAX code in diagram? I think it's an interesting one, but I'm not sure what you mean by that.
That was me. Don't care about. I think I misunderstood the question. So it was about your tool, no? And not in general on Power BI.
Well, it's also a bit about my tool. So if you think about my tool, what should be the next thing that you want to add to it? And
okay. Then it would be cool to have the data model more visual. Maybe like the diagram view, and especially in the diagram view out of the box, I'm missing the essential information about the DAX measure code. So if you have a read-only data set and you are from the user perspective, you have no chance to understand what the measure is for without the DAX or plain text description, which is often not existent.
Yep. Okay, thanks for elaborating. I fully agree with that actually. Because that also shows the importance of adding descriptions to your measures. And I know that another MVP, Reed Havens, he just posted a video last week about how you can add with Tabular Editor or autofill all measure descriptions with the DAX expression.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
He did that with Tabular Editor, so if you hover over it, I will just look up the link in a bit and then drop it in the chat. So if you hover over it, it will show the DAX expression, even if you're in read-only mode. So that is posted by Reed Havens. I think it's even a YouTube video where he explains how to do it.
Cool, good to know.
Okay. Having that said, thanks for all the feedback. I really love to hear more about. If you have more suggestions, more ideas, feel free to reach out to me and tell me more about it. A short wrap up. External tools for me are they are fully depending on the Analysis Services metadata format, so on the new metadata format. They allow you to develop third-party tools and fully integrate them with Power BI in the way you would like to do it and developing other tools than only Power BI Desktop. And it opens up tons of opportunities to contribute to Power BI. To me, the last one is a really powerful one. And to be very honest, I work nowadays more with external tools than the editor in Power BI itself, especially if you talk about DAX. So not really about the Power Query expression, but especially with DAX, I do a lot more with the external tools. Having that said, I want to wrap up my presentation. I believe there are 2 minutes left. So if there are some questions or there's anything you want to know about external tools or something Power BI related, feel free to ask, drop it in the chat, or feel free to unmute. Martin asked something. Do external tools inside Power BI automatically update to a new version of each tool? No, they do not. They have a separate update schedule. You might have seen it during the demo. Once I opened ALM Toolkit, on the right bottom, it showed that I needed to upgrade ALM Toolkit, and the same happened for DAX Studio. So you need to update the tools one by one. Maybe a good addition for the next version of external tools, that they come with the Power BI installation and update automatically as well. Marcus, if I would want to show them Tolman inside again, yes, of course. Let me find it. Here it is.